The galaxy believed humans were weak. That belief was old, comfortable, and shared by almost every major empire. Humans talked too much. They traded instead of conquering. They built alliances, signed treaties, and avoided open war whenever possible. To the older races, humans looked soft, emotional, and slow to anger. Their fleets were smaller. Their weapons were restricted by laws they helped write. Their leaders spoke of peace even when insulted. Because of this, the galaxy decided humans were safe to ignore. Safe to pressure. Safe to test. The Velka Dominion believed this more than anyone else. The Velka were ancient, proud, and cruel. Their empire had grown by breaking smaller races, one border at a time. When they saw a human research station near a dead star, far from human core worlds, they saw an easy lesson to teach. The station was small. It studied gravity waves and star decay. It had scientists, engineers, and a light security team. No warships guarded it. The Velka commanders smiled. This would be quick. A show of strength. A reminder of who ruled the outer systems. They jumped into the system without warning. Velka cannons fired once. The station shattered into silent pieces. No shields flared. No return fire came. The Velka expected screams. They expected panic messages. They expected escape pods flooding space. Instead, there was nothing. The debris drifted slowly, turning in the cold light of the dead star. Velka ships scanned the area again and again. No life signs. No power signals. No emergency beacons. Only silence. Then one of the Velka officers noticed something strange. A large metal plate floated among the wreckage. It was not part of the station's design. It had been cut from the main hull and polished smooth. Words were carved deep into it, rough but clear, made by human hands before death. Two simple words stared back at the Velka crew. We remember. The bridge went quiet. The Velka commander laughed to break the tension. He said it was meaningless. Humans loved dramatic words. He ordered the fleet to leave the system. The mission was complete. Yet as their ships prepared to jump, a strange feeling spread among the crew. It was not fear. It was unease. Something about the silence felt wrong. The Velka Dominion announced the destruction of the station to the galaxy. They framed it as a border enforcement action. A warning against human expansion. Some empires protested weakly. Others stayed silent. Many secretly agreed. Humans had been getting too confident. When the news reached human space, there was no loud reaction. No angry speech. No fleet mobilization shown on public channels. Human leaders expressed regret. They called for investigation. They requested talks. To the galaxy, it looked like the usual human response. Calm. Controlled. Passive. The Velka mocked them openly. They called humans cowards. They said the words on the metal plate were empty. But deep inside human space, far from cameras and diplomats, something changed. The message from the destroyed station reached a black archive, a place few knew existed. It was not a place of anger. It was a place of memory. Records were unlocked. Old files were opened. Names long forgotten were spoken again. Humans did not respond fast because humans remembered too well. They remembered every colony burned in the early years. Every treaty broken. Every time they had chosen peace and paid for it in blood. They also remembered the last time they had been pushed too far. That memory had scared the galaxy into writing new laws. Now those laws were being tested. In quiet shipyards, lights turned on after years of darkness. Hulls covered in dust were uncovered. Old warships, designed before limits were placed on human weapons, were checked and repaired. Retired admirals received messages marked with codes they had hoped never to see again. They did not ask questions. They simply packed their things and left. On distant training worlds, human soldiers were recalled. Not with speeches. Not with anger. Just 3 words repeated across secure channels. Stand by. Prepare. Weeks passed. The Velka Dominion noticed nothing at first. Trade continued. Borders remained still. Humans still sent diplomats. Still asked for peace. Other races relaxed. They thought the incident was over. Then Velka patrols on the edge of their territory began to report strange sensor readings. Gravity distortions. Faint engine traces that vanished when approached. One patrol ship failed to return. Then another. The Velka command blamed pirates. They blamed faulty sensors. They refused to believe humans were involved. Humans were not that bold. Not that dangerous. Meanwhile, human ships moved through deep space without using normal jump routes. They used paths mapped long ago, routes considered too unstable by other races. Humans had studied chaos, not avoided it. They learned how to move where others could not follow. Still, no attacks came. No messages. Just absence. Systems the Velka depended on began to fail. A fuel depot near their border lost power and went dark. No explosion was detected. No enemy ships were seen. The station crew was found alive days later, drifting in emergency shelters, shaken and confused. They reported no boarding, no battle. One moment everything worked. The next moment, nothing did. The Velka command grew angry. They demanded answers from humans. Human diplomats responded politely. They denied involvement. They expressed concern. They offered help. The galaxy watched closely now. Something was wrong. Humans were too calm, too quiet. Old races began to remember stories passed down through generations. Stories of a younger humanity, one not yet bound by rules. Stories where humans did not shout before war. They went silent. The message we remember spread through networks and private discussions. Analysts argued over its meaning. Some said it was a threat. Others said it was grief. The truth was simpler. It was a promise. On a human world far from the core, a woman stood before a wall of names carved in stone. They were the names of scientists lost at the research station. She was not crying. She placed her hand on the cold surface and closed her eyes. Behind her, officers waited without speaking. When she turned, her voice was steady. She gave one order. It was not loud. It did not sound angry. Begin Phase 1. Across the galaxy, systems shifted in small, almost invisible ways. Human trade ships changed routes. Data networks adjusted. Alliances tightened quietly. No one could point to a single moment and say the war had started. But deep in their instincts, the older races felt it. The calm space between stars felt heavier. Like air before a storm. The Velka Dominion finally realized something was wrong when a border fortress vanished from sensors entirely. Not destroyed. Not damaged. Gone. Space where it had been showed no debris, no radiation, no trace. It was as if it had never existed. Panic rippled through Velka Command. They scrambled fleets. They sealed borders. They demanded emergency meetings. Humans did not attend. For the first time, fear crept into the galaxy's thoughts. Not loud fear. Quiet fear. The kind that keeps you awake and listening. The kind that remembers old warnings. Somewhere in deep space, human ships waited. Engines cold. Weapons ready. Crews calm. They were not angry. They were not rushing. They had all the time they needed. The galaxy had crossed a line long ago and forgotten it. Humans had not. They never forgot. After the silence spread, the galaxy tried to return to normal, but nothing felt normal anymore. The Velka Dominion told its citizens that everything was under control, yet fear leaked through every channel. Human space stayed quiet, too quiet, and that silence pressed on the minds of observers like a weight. Inside human territory, the response was not loud or proud. There were no victory speeches, no angry crowds, no calls for revenge. Instead, humans gathered in small rooms, in command centers buried deep under planets, and on ships drifting far from trade lanes. Faces were calm, but eyes were heavy. They watched old recordings from the destroyed station. They listened to the final reports from scientists who had believed knowledge was safer than weapons. The loss was not just strategic, it was personal. Many of those scientists had families, friends, students. Humans felt the pain deeply, but they did not let it control them. Emotion did not explode. It hardened. In a secure chamber, senior human leaders reviewed history, not Velka history, but their own. They remembered past mistakes where mercy was taken as weakness. They remembered times they spoke too much and acted too late. This time was different. Orders moved quietly through layers of command. Fleets were not gathered in one place, they were scattered, hidden, patient. Human engineers reactivated systems designed to work without support, without supply lines, without mercy. Soldiers trained in silence, repeating drills that focused not on speed, but on endurance and control. Emotion was allowed, but only in private moments. A young officer stared at a hologram of the destroyed station and clenched his fists until they shook. His commander did not tell him to calm down. She simply said, "Remember why we move slowly." That sentence spread through the ranks. Meanwhile, the Velka Dominion made its second mistake. They believed the lack of immediate retaliation meant victory. They pushed further, expanding patrols, tightening control over nearby systems, seizing neutral trade routes that humans once protected. They spoke openly of human decline, of how peace had made humans forget how to fight. Other empires listened and grew uneasy. They noticed small changes. Human diplomats stopped attending minor councils. Human merchants withdrew from risky markets. Data exchanges with human networks slowed. Nothing illegal, nothing dramatic, but enough to feel like a door quietly closing. On a distant human shipyard, an old battleship was finally cleared for launch. Its hull was scarred, its design outdated by modern standards, yet its core systems were untouched by treaty limits. As it powered up, crew members placed small personal symbols near their stations, reminders of why they served. Some were names. Some were dates. None were slogans. At the same time, Velka border worlds began to experience strange failures. Communication delays. Navigation errors. Power fluctuations that engineers could not explain. Velka officials blamed sabotage by rivals or internal decay, refusing to say the word human. They still believed humans lacked the courage to strike directly. But courage was never the human weapon. Patience was. In a quiet human command hub, a strategist reviewed a map of Velka space. She marked no targets for destruction. Instead, she circled supply nodes, data relays, and decision centers. Her plan was not to break the Velka fleet. It was to exhaust the Velka mind. She understood something the Velka did not: fear grows fastest in confusion. As weeks passed, Velka citizens started to feel uneasy. Ships arrived late. Goods became scarce. Military patrols increased, but that only made people more nervous. Rumors spread of ships lost without battles, of crews found alive but silent, staring into space as if they had seen something they could not explain. One Velka survivor whispered a single sentence before collapsing from shock. They were there, but not there. The galaxy began to understand the pattern, but it was already too late. Humans were not attacking to win headlines. They were reshaping the battlefield emotionally, making every Velka decision slower, heavier, and filled with doubt. Every delay hurt the Velka more than a direct blow. In human space, families watched the stars with mixed feelings. They feared what was coming, but they trusted those who guarded them. Humans had learned long ago that survival sometimes required becoming something others feared. Not monsters, but reminders. The message carved into metal echoed now in human hearts, not as anger, but as resolve. They remembered who they were when pushed too far. They remembered the cost of restraint. And as the galaxy held its breath, humans continued to move quietly, deliberately, emotionally controlled but deeply motivated, step by step turning silence into the most terrifying weapon the stars had ever known. The silence did not break. It deepened. Across Velka territory, commanders waited for alarms that never sounded and attacks that never came. That waiting became torture. Every quiet moment felt like a mistake waiting to be discovered. Velka leaders demanded action, but no one could point to a clear enemy. Humans were still speaking politely in public channels, still asking for dialogue, still calling for restraint. That contrast confused everyone. How could a species prepare for war while asking for peace? The answer lay in the emotional discipline humans had learned through centuries of loss. They could mourn and plan at the same time. On a human monitoring station hidden inside an asteroid belt, analysts watched Velka communications in real time. They did not celebrate intercepted fears. They noted them carefully. Every raised voice, every argument between Velka officers, every delay caused by doubt was recorded. Humans were not just fighting fleets, they were studying fear as a system. One analyst paused a feed where two Velka captains argued about phantom threats. He whispered, almost respectfully, "It's starting." In Velka space, patrol ships continued to vanish. Not in battles, not in explosions, but in moments of confusion. Crews reported sensor ghosts, impossible readings, shadows where nothing should exist. Then systems would shut down cleanly, gently, as if turned off by a careful hand. When rescue teams arrived, they found ships intact, crews alive, but shaken beyond words. Some cried. Some refused to speak. Others repeated the same phrase over and over, voices empty. They knew we were afraid. That phrase spread quietly, poisoning morale faster than any weapon. Velka training had prepared them for violence, not for this. They were warriors who understood strength and dominance. They did not understand being watched without being seen. Meanwhile, human crews carried their own emotional weight. On one stealth vessel, a young navigator stared at a faded photo tucked into her console. It showed her brother, a scientist, smiling inside the destroyed station. She did not cry at her post. She guided the ship with steady hands, each movement precise. Her commander noticed and said nothing. Respect did not need words. Humans were fighting for people, not pride. That made them patient. That made them relentless. In the wider galaxy, neutral races began to whisper. Old elders told younger leaders to stay clear of human paths. They remembered a time when humans had been underestimated before, and the cost that followed. Trade routes shifted away from Velka systems. Insurance guilds raised rates. Mercenary groups refused Velka contracts. All without a single human threat. The Velka Dominion tried to respond with force at last. They launched a sweeping patrol operation, flooding their borders with ships. It looked powerful, decisive, loud. But it was also predictable. Human strategists watched the movement with quiet focus. They adjusted nothing. They simply waited. Within days, the patrol lines began to strain. Supplies ran low. Crews grew tired. Every sensor ping triggered panic. Human strikes came not against the ships, but against their confidence. Communication relays glitched for seconds at a time, just long enough to break coordination. Navigation markers shifted slightly, just enough to cause near misses. No damage, no deaths, just mistakes. Velka officers began blaming each other. Trust cracked. Emotion, once a source of strength for humans, became a weakness for the Velka. In one Velka command hall, a senior admiral slammed his claws into a console and demanded to know where the enemy was. No one answered. Because no one knew. That ignorance cut deeper than any wound. Humans understood this moment well. It mirrored their own past, when stronger empires had toyed with them, confident and careless. Humans had survived by learning, adapting, and remembering. Now they used that memory as a guide. On a distant human world, a memorial ceremony was held quietly. No cameras. No speeches. Just names spoken aloud and a promise repeated softly by those who heard them. Not again. That promise traveled with every human ship. As the Velka Dominion struggled under invisible pressure, the galaxy slowly realized the truth. This was not a war of explosions and banners. This was a war of will. Humans were not rushing toward victory. They were walking toward inevitability. And with every silent step, Velka fear grew, heavy and suffocating, until even their strongest leaders began to understand the meaning of the words carved into metal. Humans remembered everything. The first true strike came without warning, and that was what made it unforgettable. There was no battle announcement, no demand for surrender, no dramatic message sent across open channels. One moment, the Velka supply moon of Karos 9 functioned as it always had, feeding fuel, food, and ammunition to 3 nearby fleets. The next moment, it went dark. Not destroyed. Not burning. Simply silent. Sensors showed the moon still there, its mass unchanged, its orbit stable, yet every system on its surface had stopped at the exact same second. Power grids died. Artificial atmospheres shut down. Defense platforms froze in place, weapons locked mid-cycle. Thousands of Velka workers stood in corridors and control rooms, staring at dead panels, struggling to breathe as emergency lights flickered and failed. No explosions followed. No debris cloud formed. Space remained calm, cruelly calm. Velka Command panicked. Emergency signals flooded their networks, but responses came back delayed, broken, or not at all. Rescue fleets rushed toward Karos 9, but as they approached, their sensors began to fail in the same smooth, quiet way. Human ships never appeared on scans. There were no enemy silhouettes to fight, no targets to shoot at. It felt less like an attack and more like reality itself had turned against them. On a human command vessel far from the moon, officers watched the operation in silence. No one cheered. No one smiled. This was not satisfaction. It was confirmation. The weapon worked exactly as designed. A senior commander closed her eyes for a moment, remembering the research teams who had once dreamed of using this technology to save dying stars, not cripple supply moons. She opened her eyes and gave the next order without hesitation. Emotion was acknowledged, then set aside. That was how humans survived. Across the galaxy, alarms finally rang. Neutral empires froze trade. Observers stared at data feeds in disbelief. A major Velka logistics hub had been neutralized without a single shot fired, without a single warning issued. Analysts struggled to name the method. It was not hacking. Not EMP. Not known physics. It was something humans had kept hidden because they feared what others would do with it. Now that fear was gone. The Velka Dominion tried to respond with rage. Fleet commanders demanded permission to strike human worlds in return. Their leaders hesitated, trapped between pride and terror. They could not even identify the attacker clearly. How do you strike an enemy you cannot see? How do you threaten a species that remains silent while breaking you piece by piece? On Karos 9, Velka civilians huddled together in the dark, sharing air tanks and heat packs, whispering prayers to old gods. Some cried for help. Others screamed in anger. A few simply sat still, staring at nothing, their confidence shattered. For the first time, Velka citizens felt what countless others had felt under Velka rule, helplessness. Human intelligence officers monitored emergency channels and quietly marked rescue windows. Human policy was clear. Civilians were not targets. Suffering was a consequence, not a goal. Limited life support systems were allowed to reboot just long enough for evacuation craft to function. Velka commanders did not notice this mercy at first. They were too busy trying to understand how they had been defeated without a fight. When reports finally reached Velka High Command, the room fell silent. A supply moon lost meant fleets would starve. Timelines collapsed. Strategies failed overnight. This was not a tactical loss. It was structural. One human strategist summarized it simply: now they must choose between panic and retreat. That choice spread through Velka ranks like a sickness. Officers argued. Orders contradicted each other. Some units pulled back too early. Others charged forward blindly, desperate to prove strength. Human forces did not chase them. They let the confusion grow. Emotion did the work for them. In the quiet aftermath of the strike, human crews finally allowed themselves a moment. Some sat alone, thinking of the people who would never come back. Others stared at star maps, knowing this was only the beginning. No one believed the war could end here. The line had been crossed long ago, and now it was visible to everyone. The galaxy understood at last. Humans had not been avoiding war. They had been deciding how it would feel. And as fear replaced arrogance in Velka hearts, one truth became impossible to deny. The storm was no longer hiding. It had begun to move. The galaxy had finally started to notice. Velka fleets were scattered, communications fractured, supply lines crippled, yet not a single human ship had been destroyed. The strange, precise way humans struck without showing themselves unsettled everyone. Analysts studied human warships in secret channels, trying to understand how vessels that looked old and scarred could achieve such precision and control. To the untrained eye, the ships were relics, beaten by time and limited by treaties. Yet every movement they made was flawless. Fleet formations shifted as if the ships were thinking as one organism. Weapon systems adjusted instantly to unexpected threats, shields adapted to impacts before they happened, engines maneuvered with a grace that belied their size. No other species in the galaxy had ever seen such coordination. Humans did not rush. They did not attack recklessly or violently. Their strikes were deliberate, calm, and terrifying in their simplicity. The Velka Dominion tried to respond by sending elite fleets, hoping sheer numbers could overwhelm the humans. But every engagement ended the same way. Velka ships found themselves outmaneuvered, cut off, and neutralized before they even realized what had happened. When survivors returned, they could not explain it. They spoke in whispers of ghosts in the system, of vessels that appeared only to vanish, of silence so complete it left their minds unbalanced. Human crews, meanwhile, did not celebrate. They did not gloat or record victories for propaganda. They moved on to the next target, quietly and with purpose. Every strike had intent, not rage. Every maneuver had a lesson for the enemy. The Velka Dominion began to realize this was not a war fought for power or territory. It was a war fought to teach a truth. Humans had patience beyond what the galaxy could comprehend. Their power did not lie in explosions or overwhelming numbers. It lay in control, memory, and endurance. On one hidden human command station, a young analyst stared at the latest Velka fleet logs. The data was clean, precise, yet horrifying. He understood the weight of what humans had unleashed. Every decision the Velka had made was anticipated and countered before it even left their minds. He swallowed hard, thinking of the families who had been lost at Karos 9. He felt the sorrow, the anger, and the resolve, all at once. This emotional discipline was what made humans different. On another vessel, an older human captain traced her fingers over the names of fallen crew members, remembering each of them as more than data points. She did not cry, she steeled herself. This loss was personal, but it would fuel the precision and patience that ensured the Velka would never strike humans or their allies again. Every move the humans made was a statement. Power was not just weapons or numbers. Power was remembering what mattered and acting with clarity, even under grief. Across the galaxy, other species began to whisper warnings to each other. Traders avoided routes near human systems. Mercenary guilds refused to fight humans, citing unknown risks. Even distant observers reported the calm but devastating strikes with unease. Human ships did not rely on brute force. They relied on the understanding that fear, doubt, and hesitation could destroy an empire faster than any fleet of missiles. In Velka space, a young officer stared at the remains of a fleet that had vanished overnight. The panic in his eyes was palpable. He did not shout. He could not. There were no enemies to face, only the understanding that something had moved against them with patience, precision, and knowledge beyond comprehension. The Velka realized that humanity's war was not a contest of strength but a contest of will. They had underestimated the humans for too long, and now every miscalculation cost them morale, strategy, and hope. Humans had revealed their real power, not in destruction, but in restraint, control, and an almost terrifying clarity of purpose. Every silent strike, every calculated maneuver, and every remembered loss reinforced one undeniable truth. The galaxy had ignored humans at its peril. At last, humans spoke. Not through weapons. Not through fleets. Not through dramatic broadcasts meant to intimidate or boast. They spoke through one message, sent across every channel the Velka Dominion controlled, across neutral empires, across the galaxy itself. The transmission was calm, steady, almost gentle in tone, but the words cut deeper than any cannon blast. We asked for peace. You chose targets with children. This war ends when we decide. The simplicity of the message shocked everyone. It was not a threat shouted in anger. It was a statement of truth, spoken by those who had endured loss, who had been tested, who had measured every consequence. Velka Command fell silent as the message repeated. Pride, arrogance, and fear collided in the hearts of their leaders. They tried to dismiss it. They tried to claim humans were bluffing, that no species could muster such discipline, such patience. But deep down, every officer knew. Every strategist felt it in the pit of their stomach. Humans were not bluffing. They had waited. They had prepared. They had watched. And now the time to act had come. Across human space, civilians felt the tension. Families watched news feeds in private, not for propaganda, but for truth. They saw calm faces of leaders, of fleet commanders, of soldiers who had trained for this moment for years, yet had never shown fear. The message did not trigger joy or celebration. It triggered quiet resolve. They had lost much, yet they still stood, whole in spirit if not in number. Every human knew the cost of restraint and the weight of patience. The Velka Dominion begged other empires for help, sending urgent pleas to allies they had relied on for centuries. Mercenary fleets, trade coalitions. Even neutral races were asked to intervene. But no one answered. No one wanted to stand between humans and their justice. The calm authority of the human message carried a weight that no empire wanted to challenge. The galaxy realized something terrifying. Humans did not need allies to enforce their will. They did not need to rush. They had the patience, the memory, and the precision to win alone. Within Velka ranks, arguments turned to desperation. Officers who had always believed in overwhelming force now questioned every order. Fear crept quietly, invisibly, as humans had taught them without lifting a finger. In hidden command centers, humans did not revel in the fear they caused. They monitored it. They studied it. They used it to understand, not to celebrate. Engineers, scientists, and strategists worked side by side in silence, preparing systems, checking weapons, running simulations over and over. Every detail was considered. Every possibility calculated. Human soldiers trained, not in frenzy, but in emotional control. They remembered each lost comrade, each stolen moment of peace, each lesson from the past. One young lieutenant, standing before a row of monitors showing Velka fleets shifting nervously, whispered the names of those who had died at the destroyed station. She did not cry. She steeled herself. Every name was a reminder of why they could not fail, why they must move with patience, and why they would not make the mistakes of the past. Across the galaxy, neutral observers reported an eerie consistency. Humans were everywhere yet nowhere. Their systems moved like living organisms, anticipating reactions, correcting mistakes, learning with every step. No one could predict their next move, and every misstep the Velka made only tightened the invisible noose around their empire. For the first time in history, humans had spoken not to threaten, but to remind. They reminded the galaxy that their history was long, that their patience was endless, and that their memory of injustice was perfect. And as the words echoed through every network, every fleet, every system, Velka leaders understood with bone-deep certainty that the war was no longer theirs to control. Humans decided when it would end. Humans decided how it would feel. And the galaxy trembled in quiet awe, for it had crossed a line long ago, and humans had waited to respond. The Velka Dominion's desperation reached a peak they could not have imagined. After the human message spread across the galaxy, they gathered their largest fleet ever assembled, a swarm of ships meant to crush human forces in one decisive strike. The fleet stretched across light years, an overwhelming display of firepower and arrogance, meant to signal that no species could defy the Velka and live. Commanders drilled crews relentlessly. Orders were shouted. Weapons were tested. Every officer's pride demanded victory, and fear demanded survival. They believed humans had waited too long, that hesitation would make them weak. But the humans were ready. Not in numbers, not in noise, not in fury, but in patience and understanding. Human command did not panic. Officers did not shout. Ships drifted in hidden sectors, engines cold, systems shielded and silent, crews moving with the quiet precision of those who have lost too much to be reckless. Every movement was deliberate. Every maneuver had meaning. The Velka fleet advanced, confident, arrogant, blind to what waited. Their sensors detected nothing unusual at first. Then the anomalies began. Navigation readings flickered. Routes that were supposed to be safe suddenly became traps. Communication channels distorted, confusing crews mid-order. Small errors multiplied into chaos. Yet still, the Velka did not realize what was happening. Human ships did not attack openly. They allowed the Velka fleets to move as if leading them toward victory. The galaxy watched silently as the trap unfolded. The Velka fleet entered a region of space carefully mapped by humans, a cluster of gravity wells, debris fields, and hidden asteroids disguised as nothing. It was not destructive by itself, but it created a labyrinth no one could navigate under pressure. The Velka ships, massive and proud, became tangled in the environment. Engines strained, shields flickered, weapons systems misfired. Panic spread slowly through the fleet. Officers shouted. Crews scrambled. Coordination collapsed. The humans struck only at the precise moments required, disabling engines, jamming signals, and isolating command ships one by one. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was inevitable. In the Velka command halls, leaders screamed at subordinates, blaming anyone, anything, as if yelling could bring their fleet back together. But the humans had not broken their ships, they had broken their certainty. Fear crept into every mind. Pride shattered quietly. As the trap completed itself, Velka ships began disappearing without trace, drifting silently, power systems gone, crews alive but paralyzed by shock. No one could explain what had happened. Reports came in from every sector of the fleet. Ships vanished, messages repeated themselves, crews became incoherent. Each report added to the panic. Human commanders watched in silence, recording every detail, adjusting every system, ensuring no civilian life was harmed unnecessarily. On hidden planets, human engineers prepared supply lines for the aftermath. They anticipated casualties and logistical needs. They remembered every mistake humanity had made in the past, and they refused to repeat them. The Velka had believed in overwhelming force, in pride, in intimidation. The humans had believed in patience, precision, and memory. And that belief was stronger than any fleet. When the last Velka command ship drifted into the trap center, human signals disabled its engines and quietly transferred life support to emergency reserves. No alarms rang. No missiles fired. Only silence and realization. The Velka admiral, staring at the consoles that no longer worked, understood finally that the humans were not rushing into battle. They were moving toward inevitability. Fear, doubt, hesitation, these were their weapons. And in that quiet space, the Velka realized something worse than death. They had underestimated a species that could wait, that could plan, that could strike without showing itself. Across the galaxy, observers could not comprehend what had happened. Ships disappeared, fleets faltered, empires questioned their intelligence. And in human space, the crews allowed themselves a moment of quiet reflection. They did not celebrate. They did not gloat. They remembered the scientists, engineers, and civilians lost at Karos 9. They whispered names into the emptiness of the ship corridors. Every name strengthened their resolve. Every memory sharpened their focus. The trap was not about destruction alone. It was about teaching a lesson in patience, control, and consequence. And as the Velka Dominion struggled to regain its footing, the galaxy understood one truth more clearly than ever before. Humans did not fight for pride, for ego, or for chaos. Humans fought for the memory of loss, for justice measured by restraint, for the inevitability of truth delivered with quiet, unyielding force. Humans no longer held back. The patience that had carried them through decades of underestimation, the quiet control that had allowed them to outthink the Velka at every turn, now gave way to full action. Not reckless action. Not loud, chaotic assaults. But precise, deliberate, unstoppable movement. Across the sectors where the Velka fleets had faltered, human ships emerged from hiding, their engines humming softly, shields glowing faintly in the darkness of space. They did not fire indiscriminately. Every strike, every maneuver, every deployment of power had been calculated for years, perfected in simulations, tested in secret. On the bridge of one flagship, the commander touched a screen, highlighting targets. She remembered the names of those lost at the research station, at border outposts, in colonies the Velka had attacked in the past. She did not shout. She did not tremble. She merely whispered, "For them." And the ship moved, carrying that intention into the heart of Velka space. Velka sensors detected energy discharges, but no direct attacks. Supply convoys disappeared mid-jump. Communication relays died quietly, leaving fleets isolated. Minor errors multiplied into systemic failures. The Velka scrambled, desperate to locate the source, to strike, to respond, but every attempt was anticipated, every move countered without exposure. Human ships were everywhere and nowhere, slipping through gaps in space only humans knew how to navigate, using ancient pathways forgotten by all others. Every Velka leader felt it, the weight of inevitability pressing down, the quiet knowledge that their empire had misjudged a species, and that misjudgment would cost them everything. And yet, amidst the tactical brilliance, humans were not heartless. They allowed emergency systems to reboot on disabled Velka vessels just enough to save lives, knowing that unnecessary death was not their goal. Their war was not vengeance, it was lesson and balance. On a distant world, civilians watched events unfold with hushed awe and fear. Families huddled together as reports arrived of fleets disappearing, of ships found drifting silently, crews alive but shaken beyond comprehension. Parents held their children, whispering that humans were fighting for the memory of those lost, for the dignity of life taken too early. On the human ships, engineers worked silently, making adjustments, repairing systems, ensuring no innocent life was destroyed unnecessarily. Soldiers moved with controlled emotion. A young pilot, scanning through asteroid fields and gravity traps, remembered a sister who had perished on a Velka-occupied outpost. Tears threatened, but she blinked them back and steered the ship with steady hands, every calculation exact. Humans were not monsters, but their resolve carried the weight of history. And across the galaxy, fear spread in a way no weapon could create. It was quiet, creeping, insidious, seeded in doubt and hesitation. Velka commanders argued, shouted, accused, and yet no one could act decisively. The humans had stripped their certainty away. The Empire's pride cracked, and every faltering step the Velka took only reinforced the humans' position. In hidden observation decks, human analysts studied every response, noting weakness and recalculating solutions in real time. Nothing was left to chance. Every action, every pause, every quiet movement carried intention. They did not celebrate destruction. They did not cheer death. They honored it. Each human action was measured, purposeful, emotional, but disciplined. Across the chaos, one truth crystallized: the Velka Dominion had met an enemy who did not need to fight loudly to win. Humans fought with memory, patience, and precise justice. They struck without warning, yet they remembered each loss, each injustice, each name. And as the Velka fleets faltered, crippled not by explosions but by invisible, inevitable precision, the galaxy understood that humans had finally stopped holding back. The calm that had hidden a storm was gone. The storm was now moving, unstoppable, emotional, disciplined, and terrifying in its clarity. Every human ship carried not only firepower but the weight of history, the strength of survival, and the certainty that no line crossed would ever be forgiven. Velka worlds trembled. The Empire's confidence shattered quietly but completely. And as humans pressed forward, the message was clear: patience had ended. Action had begun. And nothing in the galaxy would ever feel the same again. The Velka Dominion was unraveling faster than anyone could have imagined. Their fleets, once symbols of unstoppable power, were now scattered, crippled, and paralyzed by fear. Commanders barked orders that could not be executed, sensors failed without explanation, and supply lines that had once sustained entire sectors were gone, vanished into thin space as if erased by an unseen hand. Panic spread not only through their fleets but through every corner of their empire. The galaxy watched in disbelief, but no one dared intervene. Humans had not asked for alliances. They had not broadcast threats. They had simply begun, moving like a tide that could not be stopped. On Velka homeworlds, leaders tried desperately to maintain control. Citizens gathered in central halls, staring at holograms of their fleets, hoping to see some sign of victory, some signal that all was not lost. Yet nothing came. Supply moons remained empty, fleets were missing, and no one could explain how it happened. Fear became a living thing. It crept into every officer's mind, every soldier's heart. They remembered the warnings carved into metal long ago: we remember. The memory of human patience, human endurance, and human precision haunted them. And then the humans began their final moves. Without explosions, without massive assaults, they struck at the core of the Velka Dominion's control. Data networks were taken offline. Strategic command hubs were isolated. Supply systems stopped functioning. Each action was surgical, precise, controlled. The Velka had no chance to regroup. Fleets drifted, disconnected, and demoralized. Commanders who had once ruled with absolute authority were now shadows of themselves, unsure of reality, unsure of their empire, unsure of their survival. Human warships moved like ghosts, visible only when they chose, silent weapons striking with perfect timing. Analysts in the galaxy could not comprehend it. They could only watch the dominoes fall in slow, deliberate waves. And yet, for humans, every strike carried emotion. They remembered the losses of Karos 9, the scientists and civilians whose lives had been stolen. Each mission, each calculated movement, was infused with the weight of those memories. On a distant human vessel, a young officer traced a finger over a name etched into a worn tablet, a friend who had died at the research station. She did not cry. She did not shout. She remembered. And she acted. That remembrance fueled precision. That sorrow sharpened judgment. Humans did not celebrate the chaos they caused. They honored it. They moved through Velka space like a river, unstoppable, carrying grief and determination together. As the weeks passed, Velka defenses collapsed entirely. Systems that had survived centuries of conflict fell silent one by one. Their citizens lived in quiet terror, hearing rumors of fleets disappearing, planets isolated, and leaders powerless to stop it. Across the galaxy, neutral races took note. Never had a single species moved with such patience, precision, and emotional control. Never had a war been won not by overwhelming force but by understanding, memory, and inevitability. Finally, the Velka leaders surrendered. Not because humans demanded it. Not because of threats or ultimatums. They surrendered because they understood they had already lost. The humans had anticipated every move, every weakness, every mistake, and every hesitation. To the survivors, the humans appeared merciful. They did not exterminate the Velka race. They did not destroy the people who had underestimated them for centuries. Instead, they dismantled the empire piece by piece, stripping the Velka of power, resources, and control. But the lesson was permanent. Velka leaders would live, yes, but they would carry the weight of human patience, human memory, and human judgment for the rest of their lives. On human vessels, there were no cheers. Only quiet reflection, a collective remembrance of those lost, and a calm understanding that justice had been served. The galaxy learned in those days that humans were not monsters, but they were not weak either. They fought not out of rage, not out of pride, but out of memory, principle, and the unyielding certainty that no wrong would go unanswered. The Velka Dominion had fallen, and the galaxy had witnessed something that would be remembered for eons, a species that could wait, plan, and act with unstoppable emotional precision, striking fear and respect into the hearts of those who thought themselves invincible. Humanity had reclaimed what was theirs, not with hatred, but with the quiet, relentless force of those who remembered and refused to forgive easily. The galaxy held its breath as the final phase of humanity's plan unfolded. The Velka Dominion, once proud and unchallenged, had been reduced to fragmented command posts, scattered fleets, and leaders who trembled at every unknown signal. Human warships moved through the remnants of the empire like shadows, their engines barely making a sound, their weapons ready but used only when absolutely necessary. Every human action carried purpose. Every maneuver was measured, deliberate, and loaded with the memory of centuries of struggle. On one command vessel, an admiral traced the coordinates of every destroyed Velka installation, every lost supply hub, every stranded fleet. Beside her, young officers, born after the first human-Velka conflicts, stood silently, absorbing the gravity of what their species had accomplished. No one celebrated. No one laughed. The weight of loss, the names of friends and colleagues lost at research stations, border outposts, and distant colonies, filled the room like a quiet storm. That storm drove them. That storm made every decision precise, every strike calculated, every pause intentional. Far across Velka space, scattered fleets attempted to regroup. Confusion reigned. Orders contradicted one another. Fear had hollowed out confidence. The Velka had underestimated patience, underestimated strategy, underestimated humanity itself. And humanity did not just exploit their mistakes. They corrected them before they happened. They anticipated fear, hesitation, and arrogance, turning each into an advantage. On a distant planet, human soldiers moved quietly through strategic installations. They did not loot. They did not burn. They secured communications, stabilized power grids, and isolated dangerous technologies. Their goal was not destruction for its own sake. It was precision, justice, and restoration. Every action was emotional, yet controlled. Every soldier knew that the weight of history demanded restraint, that vengeance alone would be hollow. The human approach stunned neutral empires observing the conflict. Never had a species demonstrated such perfect balance of patience, emotion, and action. Battles were not fought with explosions alone. They were fought with memory, principle, and the unshakable certainty that every injustice would be corrected. On one human vessel, A young pilot looked out at the remnants of a Velka fleet drifting silently. He remembered a friend, a scientist, lost at the destroyed station near the dead star. He did not speak. He did not cry. He touched the console gently and whispered the name aloud. That single act of remembrance carried through the ship, through the crew, and into every action they would take that day. And then the final communications came. Velka leaders sent messages pleading for negotiation, for mercy, for understanding. Humans responded not with threats, not with rage, but with the calm certainty of those who had been wronged and refused to forgive lightly. You have crossed the line. You know it. We remember. We act now. Those words spread across Velka channels like a silent avalanche. Officers froze mid-command. Soldiers hesitated mid-step. Entire fleets became paralyzed not by weapon fire, but by understanding the inevitable. On human ships, crews felt sorrow and resolve in equal measure. They did not gloat. They did not celebrate the chaos they had wrought. They honored every life lost, every failure endured, every injustice survived. And as the Velka Dominion finally collapsed, broken not by rage but by precision, discipline, and emotional memory, the galaxy witnessed a terrifying truth. Humans did not need to shout to be feared. They did not need to attack to be unstoppable. They simply needed patience, clarity, and the memory of every wrong done to them. That combination, refined over centuries of struggle and restraint, made them an unstoppable force. Humanity had drawn its line, and the Velka had crossed it. And as humans moved through the galaxy, quiet but deliberate, the message was clear: those who underestimate humans do so at their own peril. Every star, every fleet, every empire would remember this day, not because of explosions, not because of firepower, but because of the unstoppable, frantic, and emotionally precise power of a species who remembers, endures, and never forgets. The Velka Dominion no longer existed as it had. Its fleets lay scattered, drifting like ghosts, and its leaders were shadows of arrogance past, stripped of certainty and pride. Across the galaxy, whispers traveled through neutral systems. Humans had acted, and the cost of underestimating them was immeasurable. Humanity had not sought glory. They had not sought revenge for the sake of pride. They had remembered. They had endured. They had acted with the full weight of loss, patience, and clarity, and now, the final reckoning was complete. On a hidden human command station, a young officer stood before a holographic display showing the remnants of Velka worlds. The destroyed supply lines, the incapacitated fleets, the isolated outposts, all bore witness to the quiet but absolute power of a species that had been underestimated for centuries. The officer traced the paths of those lost at Karos 9, at border colonies, at research stations, whispering each name aloud. Not as mourning, not as anger, but as promise. Every strike, every maneuver, every patient calculation had been for them. On the bridges of human warships, captains and crews worked in silence, maintaining control, ensuring no unnecessary harm had fallen on innocents, and preparing for the long process of rebuilding. Their sorrow was heavy, their resolve unshakable. Every human who survived carried the memories of those who did not, and those memories had guided every decision, every silent movement, every precise strike. The galaxy began to understand what had happened. Humans had not won through brute force alone. They had won because they remembered. They had won because they measured their anger, honed their patience, and allowed grief to guide, not consume, them. They had acted with precision so complete that fear became a weapon without a single shot fired. Velka survivors, now scattered and leaderless, looked at humanity not with hatred, but with recognition of something far greater than themselves. It was a lesson in discipline, in endurance, in memory. They had faced a species that could wait, that could calculate, that could turn loss into inevitability. The realization crushed them more than any weapon could. Across human space, quiet ceremonies were held. Names were read aloud, lives remembered, losses honored. Children who had never seen battle were taught what patience and courage meant. Scientists and strategists reflected on every choice, every sacrifice, every lesson learned. The war had ended, yes, but the memory of it would guide humanity forever. And as humans looked to the stars once more, there was no arrogance, no boast. Only resolve. They had drawn their line, and they had acted when it was crossed. The galaxy would never forget it. Every empire, every fleet, every race that had once doubted them now understood. Humans were unstoppable not because of weapons, not because of numbers, not because of fury, but because they remembered, because they endured, because they acted with emotional precision and unshakable patience. And that was the true power of humanity, quiet, disciplined, thantic, and eternal. The storm had come, it had struck, and it had left a memory that would echo through the stars forever. Humanity did not need to celebrate. They had already claimed victory in the most profound way possible, by proving that a species that remembers, that feels, and that acts with control cannot be defeated. The galaxy had learned a lesson it would carry forever. The humans had crossed from patience into inevitability, and nothing, and no one, would ever forget it.